We don't need the same things all the time. It's actually more normal to need to change our routines when the environment around us changes. The world is different now, so we have to be open to being different too. I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. I thought I'd do something a little different for you all today. This is the 52nd episode, so that means I've been hosting this podcast for a year. You could totally binge listen to the show for several days if you wanted to. I've had some really inspiring guests. I want to share with you what I've learned from this podcast so far. And it may be different than what you've gained from it if you've been listening for a while. But if you're new, then maybe you'll get a taste of what you're in for if you commit to listening to this podcast. I've learned so much, and I've grown a lot in the last year, just through these interviews and conversations with my guests and listeners who have reached out on social media and even have become my clients. One of the big things that came up a lot is about interconnectedness and the relationship between people and the environment. Native American cross-cultural advisor Kevin Martin spoke in episode 51 about how you are connected to Mother Earth. We can learn about the mother and the earth by learning about the child. It is a multi-directional relationship that is essential to supporting life. But humans are currently very disconnected from ourselves and the planet. There's this faculty that we have called interoception, or feeling the inside spaces of the body. If the inner awareness is blocked, it will also impact our ability to sense the environment and take proper actions. And our environment influences our creations. Creation is influenced by the movements of the larger whole. It does not happen in a vacuum. So the condition of our environment is very important to pay attention to when it comes to our health and those of our communities, as well as any creative endeavors we are embarking on. Because this environment affects our health and well-being, it brings out attributes in us. Bad behavior often becomes activated by external factors. Your environment reinforces qualities in you. Your health ends up being a reflection of your past and your present environments and behaviors. Culture also affects our environment, and it's our values that influence culture. Many of my guests have expressed that American culture focuses too much on individualism versus a community focus. Community is just as important as individualism. We actually can't favor one more than the other. Being confined, flying high, it can be pretty lonely, and it isn't for everyone. Hard work and individualism, they're not all they're cracked up to be. Our egos are complicated, and even our biological identity is much more complicated than we think. Even our bodies aren't exclusively made up of our own cells. We have a microbiome, and even more incredible is that we have other people's DNA living in us. Check out episode 19 with Jaylee Nelson, who researches this phenomenon called microchimerism, which occurs in all of us. Apparently, a small percentage of the cells living in our bodies actually come from other people's bodies. It's going to leave you questioning who you really are. And another value that seems to be sort of missing in our culture is reverence. You'd actually feel more if you had more reverence for things, because once we see how precious something is, it makes us want to protect it, give it more care and attention. Maybe reverence is missing. because we value our own minds too much. Do we listen to the body, or do we think the mind is in charge? One of my guests, Dr. Siri Chankalsa, said, "It's really matter over mind, not mind over matter. We have it wrong." Your mind and your body are not always on the same page. The body, unfortunately, has become disconnected from the light of consciousness in many people, and what we have to do is bring them back together. Because ultimately, we have to give equal attention to the body and the mind. And you got to do what you need to do to get out of your head and into your body, and sometimes it can be pretty weird stuff that you need to do. One of the other great themes that came up a lot on the podcast is this idea of the divine feminine regenerating the knowledge of the female healer. No offense, Mom and Grandma, I'm sure you did what you needed to do, but when women went to work, the processed food increased. And now our communities are sick. Our collective fertility is suffering, and this doesn't need to be this way. What we need to bring back is the divine, sacred feminine, the women who know how to heal their families and their communities. And this takes long-term practice after a reconnection with the natural world. In addition to that, this idea of being fully connected with our human body, it also requires that we be connected with our sexuality. We cannot separate our sexuality from the other areas of our lives, though we try to, and sometimes we have to in order to live in certain jobs and perform in certain environments. But what we have to do is experiment and find new ways to live. Here's the thing, you have no clue what the future really holds. And even though you want to control it, we all have to sort of come to this place of a little bit more non-attachment, because we're addicted to answers and data, and we don't even like sitting with the unknown. And even though we may want it to be, life is not always neat and predictable. When we want to create something, even if we have desires, we have no clue what's actually going to happen. The dying often hint to us that life isn't what we think it is and that death isn't what we think it is. But we're convinced that we know things for sure. It's difficult to let go of things. We feel losses more than we do the gains. Non-attachment requires that we feel the magic that happens when we're willing to let go of things. Letting go is actually a normal part of receiving the next season of your life, whatever season you're going into. When you let go of something, you're going to gain something new. We have to be willing to feel a little fear. Fear is not a bad thing. It actually makes us feel alive. And we are affected by these seasonal changes that are occurring in the environment anyway. We don't need the same things all the time. It's actually more normal to need to change our routines when the environment around us changes. The world is different now, so we have to be open to being different too. And so it's all going to be easier if we have self-awareness, and if we value that. We have to understand, why do I do what I do? It can be difficult to look at the truth and admit the things that we have done to harm ourselves. We often like to blame others for our problems, but we've done a lot to harm ourselves. There's actually a word for this in Sanskrit called prajna parada, or a crime of the intellect. So sometimes we make mistakes. Making intentional changes, though, makes us more mindful and more efficient. Things happen faster when there's great intention and attention given. Though trying to be perfect, because maybe we have made mistakes in the past, or maybe we're trying to live up to some sort of benchmark, but these benchmarks and these things that we're trying to achieve, they're sometimes completely irrelevant to our lives. If we have body awareness, if we have interoception, that'll increase our self-awareness, and it'll make our expression more impactful. The singer Nessie Gomez talked in episode 26 about how she focuses on how it feels in her body to create the sounds that she sings and that she makes, rather than being concerned with what others around her are going to think about how it sounds. We can express ourselves in a way that is so deeply connected with how we feel. We can enable the body's intelligence through careful attention to our routines and our lifestyles. So coming back to this idea of interconnectedness, we want the body to be able to connect with the space around us, and the health of the body and the specific organs and channels will impact how we perceive the environment around us. Skin is one of the important organs of our body because it's our connection point with the world around us. Your receptivity is separate from your decision making. First, you have to open receptivity to see everything that is available, or you're simply going to miss out. Then you can make, proper decisions from there. And one of the other reasons that we're disconnected is that there are actually negative consequences that come from the technological devices that we use. I can't even begin to go into the environmental conundrum that has been created, but our technological devices actually harm our bodily tissues. Dry eyes, anybody? And they distract our focus from the present moment and our ability to properly perceive the environment and even to process our emotions. Though I understand that they're quite helpful when we've already become deficient in our ability to connect with the outside world. But it's so much more powerful to live a life with a balanced body, with clarity in your mind and your senses, and an ability to see the truth of what is right in front of you without needing a device to do it for you. But alas, it's difficult to experience the loss of anything, even something that's harming you and making your life easier at the same time. And speaking of emotions, the theme of blocking or pushing away emotions versus diving into them has come up a lot with guests on the podcast. It feels easier not to deal with our pain until it starts being harder to deal with it. One of my favorite pieces of advice from a guest was with Arjuna, and he suggested that we all schedule a nervous breakdown every day in episode 31. And Dr. John Douillard told us in episode 12, we can free ourselves from harmful patterning that is stored from the memory of the past. And so if we can surrender, it's going to actually bring more energy through us. But when the environment doesn't support where we want to go, it's going to require more willpower to move in a new direction. So if we're strong and willful individuals with solid discipline and commitment, it may be possible to recover well-being in a way that our healers and our doctors cannot perceive at the moment because maybe they don't know our power. Now, if we don't have a lot of self-awareness, sometimes people outside us can actually see us better than we see ourselves. But let's say we do have a decent amount of self-awareness. This theme of surrender came up quite a few times with guests this year, especially in the Bring Me to My Knees episode with Coot Blackson in episode 35. And yet we also heard from some about how our mind and willpower are very powerful and how they can help us achieve great things. This can feel like a battle, between surrender and willing. But the truth is that when we're living with intention, we're being intentional with both our willpower and our surrender. For example, when we really want to become receptive to something new, we can explore, say different fasting practices to open up and strengthen that willpower. There's also a surrender that comes with it. And the divine dancer Jackie Lalita spoke in episode 5 about letting yourself be danced. How is that not a marriage of surrender and willpower? So here's what we got to do. It's time to learn from nature. Even the modern practices of drug making early on involved learning from plants. though this happens less and less as time goes on, and they focus more and more on the specific chemicals that have been synthesized from them. We can all benefit by observing nature more. We all talk about getting to the root cause. It's like a buzzword, but few people are actually making the shifts to get closer to the root cause. We have to value slowing down. Slowing down allows for a deeper connection with the internal and the external worlds. Being present is about accepting whatever is happening right now. So what are you feeling right now? I have not done this work alone. I have a team who helps me. Everything takes a team, even when we think we're being so strong and in charge. This is important to remember because I know I've had times in my own life when I thought I was so important and solely responsible for everything. Not only is that a poor use of an ego, it's also a lot of pressure to put on yourself, and it really causes a lot of unhappiness in the end. When we see how we are part of a larger field, how it influences us, and how we influence it, then life seems to develop with better flow, with less resistance, less resentment, and fewer regrets. More ease in life is so great because it means our bodies and our minds are actually being more efficient. We spend a lot of time churning on things, waiting a long time to make decisions, analyzing all the data, and tensing areas of our bodies in the process. So it's time to get back to listening to nature, basically so we can slow down, reconnect with our inner awareness, and in doing so, more deeply connect with the environment, the people we love, the communities we serve, and the delicious bounty of what this beautiful planet has to offer us. Learning how to take care of her better, and therefore taking care of all of us better. I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude for you coming on this journey with me and all of my beautiful, wonderful, amazing, inspiring guests. Thank you so much. Together, I know we are going to learn so much and make this world an even better place. You have been listening to the Wisdom of the Body. You know, I get so excited. I get this kind of goosebump feeling when I get a booking from a new client that I haven't met yet. And I get so excited because I know that somebody has made a decision to go really, really, really deep into their healing. Because I know that Ayurveda is not a quote unquote normal thing that many people have access to, at least not in the United States where I live. So I know that when someone books with me, that they've really made a decision that they want to go deep into their healing. And so you could do that on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. You can book me for either a Ayurvedic consultation if you're ready to dive in, or you can also book me for a 15-minute connection call if you're not sure where to go yet. I do have a couple offerings that are not on my website, and we could talk about that. So I look forward to meeting you. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. And meet me here next time on the Wisdom of the Body.